Data doesn't lie, your go-to for the science behind the art of parenting.
Welcome back, guys. Oh my god, it's been about a month, and your girl just needed a bit of time to just rest and rejuvenate and spend time with family. So that I could bring you heartfelt content. But I'm back, and our videos are scheduled again every Friday. So we're gonna dig into another series of videos that talk about the tests that moms do when they're pregnant, right? What your doctors recommend. I'll sort of break it up into two and start with just the lab testing and then keep the genetic testing as one piece because it makes more sense if I do it that way. So this week we're going to talk about group B strep or GBS. So stick with me and let's dig right in. Right, so first of all, these flowers, my neighbor gave them to me for Christmas, and the vase in which it sits. It's just beautiful. Brightens my day. So hopefully you have something that you can look at every day that brightens your day. If not, treat yourself with that. Okay, let's dig in. So we're talking about the different tests that a mom will do when she's pregnant that impact your baby, and I will touch on the test and tell you how that impacts your baby after your baby's born. We're starting with group B strep, GBS. It stands for a beta hemolytic streptococcus, which is a bacteria that about 20 to 40% of the population just carry as a commensal, meaning they carry it around and it doesn't affect them. They carry it either in your gut or in the vaginal tract. And this is all well and good that we carry it around, but it can affect our babies, and that's why it's important. So the reason, so we've talked about what it is. Why is it important that we look for it, even though we know that it's there, is because most babies who get colonized, and meaning who show the bacteria on them or in them, come from moms who have the bacteria in them. So we want to know, so if we can test the moms and see that it's there, then we're likely to have a place where we can intervene so that babies don't get it. Why is it important? Because babies who get sick with infections in the newborn period, typically in the first 7 days of life, for the most part, it's always GBS that causes them to be sick. And how they get sick is they have a blood infection, septicemia. That's the most common way they present. They have lung infection, pneumonia. That's the third most common way they present, and the second most common way they present is a meningitis, a brain infection. So babies can get sick from it pretty easily, and that's how they present. Babies who are premature are more likely to get infected with this bacteria. So that's why it's important. Now, those babies who end up getting sick from it, 10% can die. So 1 in 10 babies who have a proven infection will pass from it. And you have about 7%, 1 in 7 babies who will have some long-term morbidity from it, right? So it's important. That's an important number that we can go after and try to change. Okay, so that's what it is. Now, the reason we test for it is because we've used different approaches where we said, okay, we know humans carry it. Maybe we use the risk factor approach and say, if a mom has it, what other things make her more likely to give that infection to her baby? If her water is broken for long, if she has a fever, things like that, then we intervene, sort of like a watch and wait approach. But when you compare countries that have done, even developed and developing countries that have used the sort of watch and wait risk factor approach versus the testing interventional approach, the countries that have done the testing approach have shown to reduce their incidence of early onset sepsis. So prior to the testing approach, the incidence of early onset sepsis was like 1.7 in every 1,000 live births. And now that we're using the testing approach, we've dropped that incidence to way below that. It's like 0.2 per every 1,000 births or 1,000 live births. So that's a significant intervention, and that's why it's important to test this particular bacteria, because we can make a difference if we do. When do we test? We test at about the 35 to 37 week gestation, typically 35 to 36 weeks. And the reason they use that time to test is because it's most sensitive, it most closely represents whether or not the mom will have it at the time at which the baby is born. The sensitivity is highest if we do it there. There's been data where they've done it early at about 25, 26 weeks, and it's not very sensitive for moms who actually carried in their vaginal tract at the time of delivery. So when we tested about 35 to 36 weeks, the sensitivity is highest or higher to show that the moms will have it at delivery, so we can trust it more, pretty much. Okay, so that's when we test for it. How do we test for it? We do a swab, just like a Q-tip that you put in your ear. We use that swab to swab in the vagina. It's not low, it's not jabbing all the way up in there. It's just like a mid-vaginal swab. Some people will do just the vaginal swab. We mostly recommend doing the vaginal and then doing a rectal swab. So vaginal first, then rectal swab, and your doctor will do it. You will not do this. Don't worry, you're not gonna be jabbing things up there. Your doctor will do this. And then you send it off to, and then we send it off to go get tested. How we test it is we culture it to see if the bacteria actually grows. And we have newer tests that can actually tell us if a piece of the bacteria is present, so PCR, if a piece of bacteria, of the DNA of the bacteria is present. Now, when we see that, the recommendation by the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, is that because based on the testing approach, we recommend prophylactic antibiotics. So moms who are GBS positive will get some type of prophylactic antibiotic prior to delivery, most effectively at least 4 hours prior to delivery. And the antibiotic they typically get, first line is penicillin, second line is clindamycin. It depends on if you're allergic to it, and there's an algorithm that will go down and figure out what's best to give the mom who is GPS positive. So you could say that why are we preferring to use antibiotics when we know that there's a risk of antibiotic resistance and it can affect. We do have data that supports the fact that it can affect the microbiome, and we've talked about this before, just sort of the general types of bacteria that live in the gut, particularly of the newborn. So why would we choose to do that knowing that it can affect that? And again, we've looked at the research and we have data that says even though it does affect the microbiome of the newborn for a short period of time, when you compare that microbiome by the time those kiddos are 2 months of age, that microbiome has corrected more quickly in breastfed babies. So the risk versus benefit, exposing them to an antibiotic that could potentially save their life, with the risk of a short-term change in the gut microbiome, is a risk versus benefit ratio that we're willing to take. So that's the test. That's how we test for it. That's what it does. That's what we're preventing in the newborn. So when the baby's born and I see that the mom was GBS positive, and the next step for me is what other things increase the baby's risk for having infection. So just looking at risk factors, the mom's GBS status is 1, how long her membranes were ruptured for, did she have a fever, did she get antibiotics, and that's just looking at the mom. When I look at the baby's risk factor, at what age were they born, gestational age were they born, and were they sort of stressed during labor, like what their APGAR scores are, and we talked about that, right? So then I put the risk factors on one hand, and then on the other hand, you just look at the baby, like in front of you clinically. Is the baby ill? And using those 2 arms, we have different methods, algorithms, calculators to help us determine the baby's risk of having an infection and what to do. Send blood tests on the baby, start antibiotics, monitor vitals and things like that. If the baby's clinically well, I'll sort of just follow that algorithm. But if the baby's sick, typically I'll just say, okay, no, let's send off the blood test, start antibiotics on the baby as we wait for those tests to come back. So as we trickle down that algorithm, we know we want to prevent it. We know that the mom got antibiotics or didn't get antibiotics, but ultimately we come down and look at the baby and I say, well, yes, you're acting sick. The quickest, the biggest, the fastest, the most common thing I see, or that any neonatologist will see, is a baby who's breathing fast with tachypneic, or a baby who's just sort of lethargic and not really acting the way you want them to, as vigorous as you want them to. So that's the algorithm. That's what we do for GBS. Tell me if you have any questions in the comment section below, and share, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week.